Welcome to the Futurati podcast. Any member of the Futurati is somebody who believes in the power of the future. We know there's a better world ahead, and we indeed have the power to make it so. In our podcast, we talk to the best minds in the world about the most urgent problems facing mankind today, and we hope you learn as much from them as we do. I'm Thomas Fry, a professional futurist and keynote speaker.
And I'm Trent Fowler, a machine learning engineer and author. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Futurati podcast. Tonight, we're joined by Seth Levine. Seth is a professional institutional investor and creator of the Integrating Investor website. Seth uses the Integrating Investor to explore more abstract investment ideas that result from his varied experiences and studies. If you enjoyed this interview, please don't forget to like the episode and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to check out our new website, futuratipodcast.com. Seth, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a blast.
Absolutely. Let's hear a little bit about your background, your interests, and what brought you to working on the problems that you're working on today.
Sure. I'll give you the long story, the short story. I'll take the middle road here. So, I've been a professional investor for, coming up on just under 20 years or so. And I got into this business, in my early 20s. I was an engineer before that, and just kind of came in green without a real background and kind of learned was learning the business on the fly. And, right around, and, I started off in the equities business. And then I moved over to the fixed income world. I had a seat kind of at a big bulge bracket bank covering bonds during the financial crisis. So I was literally at ground zero for the financial crisis. And, a few years later, we started getting all these very, large central bank interventions in the economy. And it was for the first time ever. And it just piqued an interest, what's going on here? Why are all these interventions? And, there were a lot of bold predictions that were out at the time, specifically what will happen with inflation and the dollar and markets and the economy. And really none of those predictions bore out. So it just kind of sparked a little interest. Hey, what is really going on here? Why aren't these playing out? Why isn't the policy doing what the policy's supposed to do? Why isn't the negative impacts? Why aren't they there all the people on the other, all the critics are suggesting? So just started getting into central banks at that point, and then I really got into kind of economics and just, it was like a whole wormhole from there. So still working, I've been in this investor role. And around, 3-4 years ago or so, I ended up just starting a blog as a vehicle really to really explore those ideas, kind of in a non-work way, in a sense. And, been writing ever since then. I started, I have a YouTube show that I do every Friday for the past couple months. And that's really my vehicle for exploring these investment ideas and really just untangling the cobwebs that are in my head related to a lot of these concepts, and also really just trying to create my own investment process. So it's really been a path of kind of self-exploration to a certain extent, but also really of educating myself as it relates to investing in economics.
Yeah.
So how much do you dabble in the crypto world then?
Well, Dabble is I've done nothing more than dabble. I've been around the crypto hoop, as I like to put it, probably since 2011. I was interested in it pretty early. I didn't, I'm not a crypto millionaire, right? So I did not buy a lot. I did have an interesting trading experience that I'll share here if you're interested. But
please,
I was drawn into the crypto world because of the politics of it all. I'm very much a free market guy. I call myself a laissez-faire capitalist. And I think there should be free, unregulated money, and Bitcoin was going to be that, right? Bitcoin was kind of pitched at that at the time, so I got really interested in it. Started, kind of following it, kind of listening to podcasts. Was kind of in that early crypto world. Finally, I just kept watching it, and then I remember, I was like, Bitcoin at the time was like $500. I was like, you know what, like this thing is getting shot up, and it ran from like 500 to like 1,000. I was like, man, like that's crazy. Like this seems like a bubble, right? So I'm like, you know what, like let me just buy a little bit just to understand it, right? Just to have an interest in it, and just as a way to kind of learn and tinker a little bit with. So I bought a very small amount, like minuscule amount. And like literally like a couple of weeks later, like the whole thing just crashed. It crashed down to like $250 or something like that. And it was big. It was a big lesson to me. And I think there's potentially an analogy now. It was that was when China first started to clamp down on crypto.
Right.
And that just made me realize, like, you know what, this is not what I thought it was. Like this things over like in China, like the regulatory environment in China, like can impact your trading P&L, right? So what is going on here? So that was kind of my first skeptical position I took in crypto, and it's been, made, a little bit more, made like a small amount of money, but as of now, I've been in and out a little bit over the past couple of years. As of now, I own no crypto. I have dabbled with in the past, but that was my first experience in sort of diving into crypto, and I formed really over the years I've really formed a very nuanced and different view than I had at the start of it. So it's been a pretty interesting experience for me.
Well, let's get into that then. What is the nuanced and different view of crypto that you have?
Yeah, so my nuanced and crypto view, and I'm not going to say versus anyone else. I'm going to say maybe versus my initial perception of crypto. Really comes back to actually my trading framework that I've really developed as really just very recently honed very recently as a result of blogging. And that I think I published that article, so you can go and read it. And I think that was my November of last year, November 2020 article. My website is theintegratinginvestor.com. I think I think the article is like how I process trade ideas or something like that. And I actually wrote an article about that too with Bitcoin. And I think that's entitled like Deconstructing Bitcoin Zeal into Investable Theses. I think I published that. It was either January or something like that. Around that time frame. I publish once a month, so it's pretty easy to find. But so really, I've been able to break Bitcoin and really all crypto and really all asset trading in general, but let's specifically stick with Bitcoin, down into two types of trades. I have what I call a value trade and a momentum trade. Now, I use it a little bit differently. These have meaning in sort of the quantitative investing world, which is not my background, by the way. But I really see it as value trade being the sort of, what intrinsic value, or what is the real value proposition, the utility value of crypto, right? So what is the utility value of Bitcoin? Why would someone want to own Bitcoin? Let's keep it Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, right? Why do you want to own this? What is the sort of intrinsic value? What are the cash flow potentials or dynamics surrounding that investment instrument? Because ultimately investing is about making money from money. So It really has to come down to how are you going to make money, right, off of this, right? It's very specific investing. So that's sort of the value trade to it. And early on, I was very much in that value trade. Like, this is going to revolutionize the world. Bitcoin is going to get adopted, and it's great technology. All the kind of the fintech spin. And I still see that. Like, I still see that fintech spin on crypto as being the value proposition of crypto. Right. So that's one leg of the trade, one type of trade. The other type that I've been more focused on recently has been what I'll call momentum, right? And really, it's just trend, right? There's different types of momentum, but we don't need to get into that here. But think of it as basically trend, right? Is the price going higher, or is the price going lower based upon the direction that it's moving, right? And that's how I've been able to really get my head around crypto lately is, do I think people are going to buy it and bid it up? Like, simple as that.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, are institutions coming, or are central bankers going to own it? Are more retail going to own it? Are ETF buyers? Whatever the reason, is this price trend going to persist? Momentum? Is this price going to change direction? Value, right? That's kind of the way how I think of it. So, I've been more focused recently in crypto from a momentum perspective because I faded on the value. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think there will be potential value in the future, but my personal expectation for it is significantly lower than it was 10 years ago. And that a big part of that too is because I've been waiting. It's like waiting for Godot. Like where Bitcoin is not, or crypto even, is not really a nascent technology anymore. Like, it's still new, but it's been around for over 10 years at this point, right? So where is the adoption, right? And versus, I'm not an expert on this, but versus my own kind of initial value, utility value perspective, I would have expected kind of more utility.
Yeah.
It seems very much that it's mostly being used for trading now, which is fine, but that means I have to switch over to a momentum framework to trade it.
Right.
And I can't have that value framework still, right? Because there's an inconsistency there, and it's messed with my mind, right?
So if Amazon and Walmart and a few of the other big retailers started accepting Bitcoin, would that change your thinking on it?
As a payment system,
right?
You mean like were they using it? Probably, yeah. I think so. It would have to be more than just the odds, and it would have to be more than just a few retailers here and there. It would have to be well, hold on. Let me take a second. It's not binary. Those would definitely give me more confidence in the utility value leg of the trade.
Right.
Yeah. So if banks started accepting deposits of Bitcoin and Ethereum, does that creates more utility, and that would increase the utility value in your mind? Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that would make that utility value thesis stronger.
Yeah.
And so if you could go down to your mortgage company and you could have a choice between getting a crypto loan for a house or getting a US dollar loan for a house, does that also increase the utility value in your mind?
Yeah, anytime you are using, utility value, right? Anytime cryptocurrencies are proving to have a value other than, in my view, pure speculation, right? They are actually providing a service, or they are a good. Like, that is a good or service that is increasing its utility value. Yeah, it could be in anything. I mean, I'm not a futurist here. I'm not going to speculate, what it could be used in. But if these are financial service tools, right? These are, specifically, right? So if they were being used in those circumstances, like, that increases its utility value for sure.
Yeah, I think it's worth making a distinction between the crypto assets and the underlying blockchain technology. And in the minds of a lot of people, they're just one and the same. It's just the same two words for the same underlying phenomenon, but that's not the case. And I think you're right. I think that many of us have been surprised and perhaps a bit disappointed in the fact that most crypto assets, Bitcoin, perhaps most of all, has primarily been used as an instrument of speculation. But I think that it's worth maintaining the distinction between the blockchain and the crypto assets, and the blockchain technology, I believe, still has just tons and tons of potential. And it sounds like you would largely agree with that, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I think it's worth bearing in mind that it's still very early days. I mean, I doubt that the internet that grew out of the early ARPANET would have been very impressive in 75 or 76, right? So much so that Paul Krugman famously predicted that the internet wasn't really going to have much of an impact at all. It was going to have less of an impact than the fax machine, and it didn't. That was wrong. That was wrong. I'm excited both by crypto assets and by blockchain, but I do hope that as time goes on and it matures a little bit, you'll see more and more use of it as a medium of exchange, as an actual payment system. And there are people doing that. I mean, there are hardcore Bitcoin enthusiasts who do pay for things. They even have Bitcoin credit cards that you get interest back in Bitcoin and stuff. I'm going to look into that later. So I think it is evolving in that direction, but people were so excited by the magic internet money and the fact that it just goes up in value so much. And the volatility is part of what draws people in, I think. If you just buy at the right time and you liquidate at the right time, I mean, you can 400% your money. And
Lambos,
Yeah, exactly. The Lambo money, the magic Lambo money.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction too. And, another way how I've evolved my investment thinking. I mean, again, these are all evolved ideas that are new to me. I mean, they may not be new to other people, but they're new to how I have really had to think about investing as I've gone on through this kind of personal journey, I guess, is that you could still, I have no problem owning Bitcoin for the utility value, but I had to scale that investment to in my view, properly match my expectations.
Right.
And what you see in the crypto community, and this is, I mean, again, it's a very large pool, but there are definitely people out there who I think are they're miscalibrated on the potential, call it time frame, right? Or something like that, right? So maybe if it's internet 1975, like if you went all in internet 1975, like that wasn't a good use of money, right?
Right.
A good investment, right? You had to kind of wait until the value, until kind of the facts of reality kind of bore out your value thesis in a sense, and then you could scale your trade with your conviction. So that's really what it is for me. It's about scaling the trades and specifying what types of trades and theses that I'm doing with my conviction level.
Absolutely.
And I just lost over time. I've sort of lost the conviction in the amount of conviction in the value trade. I go back to 2011. I was like magic, laissez-faire money, I'm all in, that is awesome, that's a personal opinion, that is awesome. However, I was clearly wrong. My enthusiasm at the time was not matched by the facts of reality because it wasn't really being used for the purpose that I was sort of interested in. So it's really just kind of this mental exercise of trying to calibration is the great word, right? How do I calibrate my investing to my observations and my theses and just keep it all consistent, just so I know, right? We're humans and just, we can fall prey to biases so easily that we, for me, I'm trying to get better at that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the guy that spent 10,000 Bitcoin to buy that pizza early on, he felt initially victorious that he was able to actually buy something with it. And then later, he probably went out and shot himself. But that's a whole different
Yeah, it's funny too, because I've even had over the years, I've changed my view of money pretty recently. And I'm actually in I don't know, a 5-6 part podcast show on my channel of just really exploring money. I've rethought this whole idea of money, and even bringing this back to crypto. I think having fixed asset is just it's terrible for money. A fixed amount of money, so a fixed amount of Bitcoin is actually a terrible design for money. And that's changed as my understanding or my theory of money has really changed over time. Because I'm sort of anti-fiat, right? People would probably consider me Austrian. I'm not totally Austrian, but definitely very sympathetic to a lot of Austrians, and specifically von Mises, for example.
Right.
So I'm not a fan of fiat money. I think the history of fiat money is very poor. I mean, there's been something 150, fiat currencies out in the world. None of them really have persisted. Obviously we have our modern slate, but again, 30 years or so. Oh, sorry, I guess more than 30 years, almost, 50 years is not a lot of time in monetary history.
Are you talking about since they severed the connection to the gold standard in the United States?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. That was 71 in Nixon.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So 1971, The world ended the Bretton Woods Agreement, right? The Bretton Woods Agreement was this kind of quasi gold standard that that all the major currencies were pegged to. So that would be like a hard money standard.
Right.
It was, we'll call it the gold standard. It was, I think that's debatable whether or not it was, but it wasn't pure fiat currency. We have pure fiat currency now. So the problem with fiat currency is that it's not tied to anything in reality, right? There's no basis for it in reality. So it's really just, it gets conjured, right, by the monetary authorities, and then people go use it, right? But there's no, and that's about it, right? So
right.
when you look at
there's
fiat
nothing
currencies,
else. Yeah.
there's nothing else. Yeah, there's nothing else to it, right? And what's happened historically is that the monetary authorities abuse that power. They make way too much money, right? They expand the money supply so much that the money itself just becomes worthless over time.
Yeah. See, a national currency has an obligation to the people it serves within a certain country, within the borders of that country. And cryptocurrencies don't have an obligation to any specific group. And so the people that control that currency for a country, they try to manipulate the currency to get it to better serve the people of that country. And that's where things get out of control when they try to amp things up. They turn all the dials and flip the switches and everything. And that's when it gets out of control. I keep thinking in terms of let's ratchet this forward, 50 years and we're on the Starship Enterprise flying from the Earth to Mars. What's the economy on that spaceship and how does that get operated and who's pulling the switches up there? And that's when none of the things we talk about on Earth make sense anymore.
Hey, I was told as a kid that we'd have flying cars by now, and we don't. I'm 41, so
we do have flying cars. Actually, the first flying car was the Curtiss Air car back in 1917. I mean, it was never commercially viable or anything, but yeah.
Which is it's something you want in a means of conveyance is a guarantee that it's not going to explode or fall out of the sky.
Right. But anyway, yeah. So like as it relates to currency, so then I saw Bitcoin as like, if you go back and you read the early, you could read the white paper on it. I mean, there is this, and even before them, there were the cipher, the whole cyberpunk movement, and that was a hard money that was motivated by hard money, right? And by hard money, kind of a commodity based money,
right?
And so the whole Bitcoin was supposed to simulate that with a fixed money supply. And it was supposed to be deflationary, and I just don't think that so I thought that was great at first because again the gold standard. If you look back at history, the gold standard performed. It takes a lot of flack, but the gold standard really performed quite well, right? If you look back into these quote unquote kind of free banking histories free banking periods throughout history, there've been a number of them, and they've been small, right? Because to your point, Tom, the manipulation of money by sovereigns is as old as, it's as old a story as money itself. Right. Even go back to like Rome, right? And I love the Roman example, but I'm going to screw this up. So if there are any kind of Roman, Roman history buffs out there, please don't hold it against me. But, like Rome had their coin, I think it was a denarius, right? Yep. And it was like, under Nero, it was, which is like, right around kind of, I think it was like 27 BC or something like that, right? It was like almost purely silver. And then like you fast forward a couple hundred years and it's like almost no silver in it anymore, right? And it's completely been stolen by the monetary authorities. And even though that was a hard currency, right, it was still kind of silver backed. It was still able to be kind of inflated away and stolen by the sovereign. So I'm very sympathetic to the whole. I'm very sympathetic to a private money kind of mechanism. And if you look back at free banking, right, there are these periods of, they're called free banking periods. They're not quite free, but they're significantly freer than what we have today. And the foremost experts on these that I know of are George Selgin
Yep.
and Larry White.
Yep.
And they note a couple notable periods throughout history. You have the antebellum U.S., where it was like fairly unregulated, or shouldn't even say, it was still very heavily regulated, but it was easy to start a bank in a sense versus relative to today. You have areas like Scotland in the 1700s that were free. Canada had a very, freer, I should say. Canada had a very kind of laissez, hands off. I don't want to use the word free too much, hand at banking. And what you found is that when you put the management of supply of money into the private hands, they performed quite well, actually. I mean, they weren't perfect. And again, if you go back to Selgin and White's work, they often will point out that a lot of the times the regulations were to blame.
Yeah.
And get into that if you like, but the crux of it is that I was very excited about kind of a private money, but kind of looking at these time periods, like I think you need to have something that is both tied to reality, right, tied to the real world, and also able to expand with the real world. Because I'm going to quote one of my favorite kind of economic thinkers, John Tamny. As he puts it, money is a veil, right? And money is really just an abstraction that's supposed to represent kind of goods and services that you've produced and will consume in the future, and it's this trading mechanism. So if you cap the amount of money in an economy, in a sense, you're capping the amount of production in an economy, and to me, that's very undesirable, right? We want production to expand. So if production expands, right, and everyone's standards of living is going up, and wealth is going up, the money needs to reflect that somehow. So how would a Bitcoin reflect a rise in production? I mean, the only way, the money supply can't expand, so the price would have to go up, and that then basically your cost of production is getting more expensive.
Yeah, well, the thinking is that Bitcoins can subdivide into each one can subdivide into 100 million bits, and that theoretically.
Right, but what does that mean? That just means Bitcoin's getting more expensive, right?
Yeah, but it can become a much greater amount of money that gets passed around. So it's not a finite. I mean, if you're dealing with quarters and nickels, I mean, you can't break them in half and give them to somebody. Same with micro payments that didn't work.
I don't buy that argument, because again, okay, so I could keep breaking Bitcoin down, but so what? So then let's use fiat terms, right? So let's say one Bitcoin right now is, I don't know, let's call it $50,000. So what happens if a Satoshi then becomes $50,000, right? Then what's the price of one Bitcoin then, right? Like that Bitcoin just went up by what is it, 10 to the 6th power or something like that, right? So it's not really. I think it's a fake flexibility in it, because you're just changing your scale that you're looking at, but the whole item that you're looking at is actually becoming more expensive.
I'm not going to defend Bitcoin. This is just the thinking in the background. So, so a lot of people are thinking that the libertarian thinking is moving into the metaverse, and they want things that are with the distributed autonomous organizations, the DAOs, and the metaverse. We're going to be able to create a set of rules that govern things. So a bank itself, then, in that line of thinking, gets replaced with a few algorithms, and then of course nothing can go wrong. But of course things go wrong all the time, and so that's part of the problem that we're going to run into is kind of managing the conflict that arises out of that. So I've been studying a lot of how this is evolving, and It's exciting and scary and disturbing all at the same time. So,
Yeah, I'm quite. I'm quite out. I mean, overall, I think the crypto movement is very positive. It's just, I mean, I view it more as just like fintech, and it's been a very long time since we've had meaningful financial innovation right in that space. And my view, kind of being a laissez-faire capitalist, I don't call myself a libertarian. That may be splitting hairs for some people, but I actually believe that government has a role to play in the adjudication of contracts and defending individual rights. But that's a whole wormhole to dig down. But I really see finance is heavily regulated, always, right, and always has been very heavily regulated. And I think that stymies the amount of innovation that can happen in financial services. So the fact that crypto is coming in here and disrupting that and actually creating all this innovation in financial services, like I'm quite positive on, and of course, look, nothing ever goes fully according to plan, right? I mean, the future is by definition unknowable. So things will go wrong. And the question is, can you devise a system that is flexible enough and decentralized enough such that it can react, learn from the mistakes, kind of mitigate the negative fallout and kind of move on, right? You take the failure, turn it into knowledge, and then build something better on top of it. So I'm pretty I'm pretty positive on the crypto space in general, and kind of, I wish it all the success in the world. But like the real irony of what's going on in crypto and these these DAOs, right, the distributed autonomous organizations, is like we're really just recreating banks in a lot of this stuff. We're really just creating these say the word centralized entities in financial services that are finding ways to accrue profits, which is, I think, it's great. Like, I mean, I think you need the profit motive in order to actually create stuff in the world. So it's just interesting what is going on in the crypto space. It started off as a lot of kind of political theory, but it's really morphing into something very similar to what we have today, in just in a better form. I think we're getting innovation there. So.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think it still has the advantage of the fact that Janet Yellen can't just decide to print twice as many Bitcoin tomorrow. So you may have your compunctions with a deflationary currency and issues with the fact that there's still a lot of centralization in the network, but it does have that. I mean, it's just cryptographically secured. You can't do anything else with it. I'm curious.
I think it's great.
I do as well. I'm curious as to what you would want to see in a crypto asset, in a digital money. So if you don't like the deflationary aspect of Bitcoin, you want to see it more responsive, but presumably you don't want any centralized authority who can just mint more to pay for their own projects. So I mean, what would you want to see? Like Bitcoin 2.0, how would you set about doing it in broad strokes? I mean.
Yeah, and broad stroke. I mean, I'm not an expert here,
right.
So I hope your viewers don't skewer me for this. But I'm sure the Bitcoin maximalists will find a way to skewer me anyway. That's the fun part.
It's the nature of it, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to I can, if you want, I mean, really get into kind of what, you really have to ask yourself, like, what is money, right? Because what are you trying to design? Like, what problem are you trying to solve with crypto? Like, let's just take a step back. And right, you could look at let's go back to the Bitcoin white paper in 2008. Satoshi was trying to solve something pretty specific. It was a payment system, right? He wanted a trustless electronic payment platform. That's my read of what it is, Kind of everything above and beyond that we hear today is really just that, right? It's all above and beyond that people are kind of either designing on top of the original Bitcoin or, just kind of making up, or holding or wishing that it is the case in their view. So, Bitcoin as a payment platform, I think has some good things and some bad things, right? I mean, I think the good thing about the payment platform itself is that it's decentralized, doesn't require, doesn't require any authority to be involved or verification, right? It's got a nice, kind of very elegant incentive scheme in there to keep things in check. The downside is that it's very slow, right, as a payment system, right? Like think about how many payments Bitcoin can do a second versus Visa, right? Like Visa can do like something like hundreds of thousands of transactions a second, right? Where Bitcoin just literally can't do that. And that's the nature of that as a payment system. So I think that's an impediment. I don't want to say it's a flaw, but maybe you just use it for something else, right? Maybe you're not using it to buy pizza. Maybe you're using it to send your down payment, right, on your mortgage or something like that. So Bitcoin is a payment platform, similar to like how like Ethereum is a different type of, it's solving a different type of problem, right? So neither in my view are money, right? What is money in my view? I mean, that is a work in progress for me. That's somewhat differentiated. Like I said, I'm kind of exploring this on my own show. And really, I see money as really, if we take a step back and you say, what is money, right? So if we're looking to design digital money, right? Let's be specific here. You have to say, okay, well, what is money? And we could go back and like the classic definitions of money are, exchange, medium of exchange, store value, kind of monetary standard,
unit
and unit of account, right? Now, I think that was written in like 1885. That if you look at how that definition has evolved over time, like you could ask, I bet you go on the street and you ask four different people what money is, you're going to get four different answers, right? Because that has completely evolved over time to what money means. And, people, whether it's a store value, whether, it's, well, anyway, so, so some people store value, some people it's a medium exchange. Some people think it's just something that the government prints, right? Some people think there's the whole fiscal theory of money,
Sure.
The government gives, kind of gives it legitimacy. To me, strip it all down, right? There's really only one of the, call it big four, kind of sub definitions in there that makes sense to me. And it's the standard unit of value, right? So like I kind of hold this in my view as in an analogy form, like money is to length as dollar is to inch, right? So money is a measurement concept, right? We use money to measure economic value, just like we use length to measure kind of spatial value, right? Or we measure time to, I don't know how you would, abstract time away, but like, to measure time, the passage of that thing we call time, right? So money really is just a way to measure stuff, right? It's to measure the production, right? If we go back to, if you want to do a thought experiment, like let's put ourselves on, as, kind of a deserted island, like on a farm, let's say, right? So let's say I have nothing, right? Like I literally have nothing, right? I have to make my own stuff in the world, right? So let's say I go out and I plant some crops, don't matter, let's not worry about kind of how that happened. And now like I have all these, let's just call it corn. Like I have all this corn, right? I have these, bushels and bushels of corn, right? Well, I don't want to eat all those bushels of corn. I want to trade that, right? Mm-hmm. So how do I trade that? There's the barter system, but also now I can go out and like, we could use something, swap it for something called currency. And then I could trade it, with you guys, right? For stuff that I want. But how do we measure? But in order to do that, we need some kind of way to measure that, right? How do I know what I'm going to get from you is good for me? And when you're going to get from me is good for you, right? We have to measure that value. Even if it's just to ourselves, we have to have a way of measuring that. And that to me is the concept of money. So instead of thinking, oh, I've got 10 bushels of corn that I could trade, right? 10 bushels of corn on my personal balance sheet. I could just say, oh, I have $1,000. I have no clue what the corn bushel exchange rate is. So don't quote me on that, but now I can hold what money does as a measurement concept. It allows me to know what my production is worth, right? It allows me to measure that value, know what it's worth, and know what then I can go trade for it with. So I see money as this measurement concept, right? So if we want to have a new measurement concept, it has to have, in my view, it has to be like the bushel of hay, right? Or the corn, right? It has to have some correspondence to reality. That's why I think the gold standard actually worked, to the degree that it did, is that, we're not all gold. I'm not a gold miner. Very few people mine gold. But you realize you have a sense for what it takes to mine gold. You have a sense for, you need a mine, you need all this stuff, you need the scientific knowledge, right? So that gold, right, an ounce of gold represents a certain amount of real world effort. And that you could trade for that effort. You could trade your effort for that effort because someone else knows that that's effort and will trade for that effort. And that's kind of how I see money. I separate out all these other definitions of money as completely different concepts. Excuse me. So I'll say, here's a good example. What is money, right? Is a dollar bill money? Like most people will be like, oh yeah, dollar bill's money, right? What about checks? Like, are checks money? Well, yeah, write you a check, like that's money. Like, what about credit cards? Like, is that money? Well, I don't know. Like, I have a limit on my I have an account limit on my credit card. Like, what's money? Like, all of it, some of it. I go and I swipe it. I'll buy something from you, but like, I'm not paying you anything. It's a debt that I owe the credit card company. Oh, so now debt is money. Oh, what about bonds? Are bonds money? They're like, no, bonds aren't money. Like, how could bonds be money? They're like, oh, well, now if you look at the institutional, money market world, like bonds are money. People use bonds to exchange bonds and lending. Like it plays a role of currency in the institutional world. So what about gold? Is gold money, right? I mean, so I've just shrunk my definition of money to the standard unit of account. And now I call those other things. Like I call dollar bills currency. I'll call like even credit card transactions currency. I'll call gold, like I'm not calling that currency, right? Because I can't buy anything with gold, right? But I call that a store of value, right? I could buy gold and it can store value for me. And, at one point, gold was even a monetary standard of itself, right? Gold had that monetary standard rule, right? The dollar was worth X amount of ounces of gold. So I just started to kind of subdivide all these, separate all these kind of definitions of money to keep them very specific so I know how I'm using them in my brain. So if we want to talk about, I'm sorry, this is a super long-winded way of coming back to answer your question, but if we want to talk about like what is a good cryptocurrency, what is a good crypto money? Well, okay, to me it would have to be something that has bears has some bearing in reality. So like even Bitcoin wouldn't be that bad to me because again, you have to produce it, even if it's quote unquote wasteful. Like you need to use electricity, you need processing power, you need people to solve problems.
Yeah.
It just needs to be able to expand with the production capabilities of the world. I don't know how you do that, right? Because like people, it's the world economic production is incredibly dynamic and definitely impossible to measure.
So let me pose a question to you. I came up to you and I was going to sell you the official NFT of a $100 bill. So you would have the official version, and you could presumably go out and get a trademark on that official version of the $100 bill. Is that worth anything?
Yeah, I mean,
keep in mind it's an NFT. It's not.
I mean, well, anything we may not be thinking the same thing of anything. To me is non-zero, right?
Okay.
So like there is, as an old kind of bond salesman I used to work with, used to say there are no bad bonds, just bad prices, right? So would I be willing to pay a penny for that NFT? Like I don't know, like 1 cent, like maybe like why not? Like to me, like maybe there's some kind of option, there's an embedded option value in it, even though like it's most likely, in my view, again, not an expert in the field, but I'm pretty skeptical of NFTs. Like what you just said, like I can't see that having a lot of potential. I see that most likely going to zero in my sort of own estimation, but maybe there's some sort of, there's some option value in there. Maybe I could sell to you for 2 pennies or, or someone else. Yeah.
So if we had money that's backed by gold, if it was NFTs of gold, would that be the same thing?
Again, not really super tight on my knowledge of NFTs, but I'd be pretty skeptical of that again from what I do know about
commodity-backed NFTs are the future. Yeah. Commodity-backed JPEGs of monkeys.
Yeah, exactly, right.
It's because we live in a cartoon universe. Yeah.
It's a great good metaphor. Yeah.
So you've written a little bit about NFTs and the metaverse, and I think it's fair to say that your response is a lot like your response to Bitcoin. I mean, it's not that you think there's nothing there, but possibly you're a little underwhelmed. So I think one of your most recent posts was about this topic, and it's kind of in the news. Everyone's sort of going nuts about it. So why don't you just walk us through your reaction to NFTs in the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I wrote that article because I heard everyone was talking about the metaverse. I had a guest on my podcast whom I really respect, a guy, Hugh Henry. He was talking about the metaverse. I was like, you know what? I used to just kind of write it off as kind of like tech bros speak, like, okay, like I've had enough of that already, but, it's just kind of like everything else I find, there's, that was an overreaction, right? There seems like there is something there that people are getting excited about. And like, so I had to kind of just go see what it is. Right. So I did. And again, that's an article I written like 2 months ago, right? So in July, and so I mean, this is, if anything, I think you'll see consistent thinking kind of from me is that I have to understand what it is, and then I have to understand if it has utility value and if it has momentum value, and then I have to calibrate kind of my conviction to my position size, right? That's sort of my investment framework. That's the way how I think about investing these days. Sounds very simple. For me, it's very difficult to actually do. And it's definitely a work in progress. So, so again, it's like, what is the metaverse, right? So we have to already start, and people get very excited about the metaverse. Everything is going to be in the metaverse this, the metaverse that, right? So like, what is the metaverse, right? Like you have to go and like, look, like, what is the metaverse? And at least what I can tell is like the metaverse is just basically like a virtual world. It's basically like the worlds of or lands of like a video game, right? It's an online living environment. Okay, well that sounds a lot less intimidating than the metaverse. So you kind of look, okay, like when people say the metaverse, like what do they really mean? And what I found from my research is that, really, kind of Fortnite, that popular video game Fortnite is sort of like the largest quasi metaverse. Like there's no real metaverse per se where we all are living in avatars and kind of living in this virtual world, kind of all on our own. Like people are logging on to Fortnite and they're playing the video game, right? And they're doing, but they're doing more than just playing the video game, right? It is evolved into this whole social experience where they're meeting with friends to chat and hang out. There's actually now like virtual concerts on there. So it's becoming a whole kind of experience onto itself. Right. And now there are other metaverses that are popping up as well, who are trying to capitalize on this. One of them that I found is called like Decentraland, which is based off of, that's kind of run off of cryptocurrencies. And that is not owned per se, but that is very interesting that that actually has a digital economy, right? So the whole purpose of Decentraland is purely economic in a sense, whereas Fortnite is social gameplay. Like Decentraland, they're actually selling kind of virtual spaces of land, using a native cryptocurrency. They're using a native NFT to kind of record the rights to it. And the idea is that people are going to come in here, like spend actual money, real world money, converted into native cryptocurrency, and use that in this economy to actually start trading stuff and building stuff. So like people are building architecture, they're building casinos and games, And I guess, I have not kind of I do not have an avatar in Decentral World. Do not try and find me there, integrating investor Seth or anything like that. I'm not there, but you look at it and like these like parcels of digital land are actually trading and people are buying them and selling them. And you look at something like Fortnite. Fortnite has something like 350 million users, or accounts, right? That's not users per se,
Sure.
but that's a lot of potential customers. And you think about how big the advertising world is, and that there is an economy for eyeballs. I mean, social, Facebook, Instagram, network TV. I mean, these, Google, like this is all, they are in the business of eyeballs. Like, well, there seems like there's a lot of potential eyeballs in the metaverse. So I understand why certain people are getting excited about it, because to me, it could be another avenue, a commercial opportunity that is more akin, how I understand it, to like that advertising world than to maybe, living in a virtual world. We're all going to wake up and, plug into the matrix like Neo, wake up in the morning, kind of plug into work, plug into the metaverse, and at the end of the day, kind of plug out, or maybe even stay there. Like, I don't, that to me seems a little bit too sci-fi for me, for a variety of reasons. But, this metaverse idea, I mean, it doesn't exist now, but, so again, kind of breaking things down, I don't see it yet as having this huge value component. Like to me, like it's small again, right? So you just size the trade appropriately. But it's kind of, there's interest. It's not zero in my view, right? Like I understand why certain people are getting excited about it and the utility that certain people are seeing in it. Again, it's very analogous to cryptocurrency. Some people I think are just, I disagree with my calibration of the value. Is different than what other people see in it.
Right. So just to kind of take a step back, given everything that's happening with central banks, with crypto, with NFTs and the metaverse, all of these new technologies coming online, this new resurgence of interest in Austrian economics and private money, do you have any, I don't want to say the word predictions, 'cause you're not really in the business of that, but do you have any just general thoughts on the future of finance and maybe fintech more generally, if you want to take it in that direction?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I like to, I'm lazy, right? This is kind of what I got drawn into philosophy. And then it sounds like really dry and dull and boring. But for me personally, like, I was very, very influenced by the works of Ayn Rand, and her philosophy. And, she has an article called "Philosophy Who Needs It," and this was a speech she gave to the students of the graduating class at West Point. And there's a line in there that just like struck me over the head like an anvil, like Wile E. Coyote, just the anvil falling off the freaking canyon ridge and just flattened, smashed my head into a pancake. And it was, I'm going to paraphrase it, I'm going to butcher it, I apologize to everyone out there, but basically it's something like, look, as a human being, like, we don't have a choice. Like, you need a philosophy in life, right? Your philosophy, now I'm going on, analogy here. Like, your philosophy is basically the operating system for your brain. Like, as humans, like, we have choices. Like, a human being by nature, we have choices. And our philosophies, whether we know it or not, are really what drive those choices. And, she said it totally different, way more eloquently.
Right.
And I was just like, oh, damn, like, I don't know why I'm doing certain things. Like, don't I want to figure that out? Right. Like, that seems important. Like, I should know the operating system that my brain is running on. Like, I want to know what premises are in my brain. So this took me down this took me into philosophy. And what I learned from philosophy is the power of concepts and the power of principles. And really, like, if you have a well-formed principle, it sounds so simple in life, but it's extremely powerful, right? Because it is a principle because it has such wide explanatory power. So to bring it back to your question, right? So where do I see the future of finance? Like, I have a principle that I think is well grounded in history and reality, and that is that the freer an economy is, the more prosperous it'll be. The freer an industry is, the more prosperous it'll be, the more innovation, the better humanity will be for it. So my prediction is pretty simple. The freer that financial services world will be, right? If we reduce regulations or can work around regulations, which is really what cryptocurrency is, and even the whole shadow banking system, and that's a whole separate topic out there too. But even the current monetary system has largely moved away from central banks. So the further we can get away from centralized authorities, right? Centralized regulations, centralized rules, and into a more decentralized, laissez-faire world, I think the more prosperous we're going to be as a society, and the more prosperous an industry would be, right? So for me, it's not coincidental that finance is such a staid and boring and kind of like terrible industry, like terrible user experience of an industry,
right,
versus technology, which is like the exact opposite, right? Like finance is very heavily regulated, like technology is very lightly regulated. So if we can move finance more in the world of, in the direction of technology, I think you're going to see very exciting things out of the finance space. And same with money, right? If we got rid of, if we had laissez-faire money, I think you would see really, really stable money in the long run, and very kind of an innovative money, like things that I'm just simpleton. Like there's no way I could come up with like what kind of innovation of money and finance would be made. Like I would have never seen Bitcoin come, so blockchain technology coming, right? Like that's I'm way too, I'm not that smart, but you could see why the innovation of financial services came with a tech angle to it. It came with a tech angle to it because it was free, right? That was an area of the economy that was less regulated, able to actually experiment and tinker with, and then actually get an edge on financial services, to where the financial services today are threatened. They're to some extent threatened, right? And where they're like, oh, I guess we have to start like innovating things, right? Like an innovation can't be like open 9 to 5. Oh, and sometimes on Saturdays. Like,
right.
No, like you need to, right? Like you need to always be on. You need to have electronic payments. Like you need to be making people's lives better. And the more kind of the freer, the financial services are, like laissez-faire, less regulated, and all that, like the better off, the better that it will be. The better those goods and services will be, the more safe our monetary and economic systems will be, and like the better off like we'll all be as humans.
Well, fantastic. We really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your perspectives with us.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great insight there. Thank you.